Take a deep breath. Tune into the beating of your heart and awaken to a fresh perspective. Welcome to See More with Morcie, your go-to podcast for a fresh perspective. About 2 years ago, I had this unexpected glimpse of enlightenment. And when I say enlightenment, I mean a profound shift in consciousness or shift in awareness where no longer was I seeing through the filter of bias or ego, but recognizing oneness, unity consciousness, where the I dissolved, me dissolved. Everything was me. I was everything. I was in my mom's room. We were watching tennis, the usual thing that we do, watching tennis on TV. And at that time, when I was watching tennis, very often I would get into these shifts of just being still. I don't have much of an explanation besides I had just started getting into tennis. I was into it a little bit ago, like 2 years before that, but it was still generally the beginning. But I found that it took so much concentration and focus, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. You know, I'm a sports person. I love sports, athletics. So I was in this still relaxed, content space. And then suddenly a shift came. And when the shift started to arise, I was fully there noticing it. It was as if I was sinking into something or deepening into something. It felt like there's a depth. And everything around me was me. Air quotes in me. I was the player on the TV screen. I was a TV screen. I was my mother's voice as she was yelling at the television. It's sports, it happens. I was my mom. I was the room. I was literally the space. The shift was so profound that I felt like I could see around the corner of the open door in the room. It's so interesting because I felt a profound peace. I also felt like there was nothing I needed. There was nothing I wanted. It was so different from that ego state of consciousness, right? And when I say ego consciousness, it's separateness or the individual, the I. And a big aspect of ego consciousness is want and desire, right? Being here in this world of form. It's an aspect of the human experience. But in this unity consciousness, in this heightened state of awareness, there's nothing I wanted. And there was such joy in that. Like, hell yeah. It's just nice to be here. To be here. It didn't matter my life situation in that moment. It was perfect. It was enough. It was sufficient. I remember kind of laughing, just like taking it in a bit. And also being in stillness and being there. I did hear the voice in the head that we always hear. It was there, but it was distant. And I wasn't tethered to it. It was there. Although I recognized unity consciousness, there was still an awareness of my individual body and individual self. It was just expanded. Now, it stayed like that for a little bit. I would say I went on to bed and it kind of lowered and I woke up It was still kind of settled. Wasn't completely back to ego consciousness, but it was still there. And I remember being in the passenger side of the car with my mom. And we were driving and a car cut us off. And normally I would comment on that driver's horrid driving. Like, why are you cutting us off? But in that moment, I felt no resistance. In fact, my awareness of self, it was expanded beyond the focal point of this body. It was so expanded that I, quotations, felt like I was the car that cut us off. So there was absolutely zero resistance in that moment. There wasn't even a problem with it. There was no problem with it. It felt relieving, stilling, freeing. Those were more of the profound moments that I remember. It was 2 years ago. It was also up and down. It didn't like stay permanently. And I would say it lasted around 24 hours, but it was up and down. It taught me so much. It showed me so much. And by the way, there was no plant medicine involved whatsoever. The funny thing is, I hadn't had any rituals or any ceremonies with plant medicine in months before that. I was with a couple friends and in another circumstance where I was trying to do a ceremony with psilocybin and I couldn't find it. No one had it. It was just not coming to me. And I started to feel like, this is not just a coincidence. I'm not meant to have it. You know, if you're familiar with plant medicine, then you know that it calls to you. You take it because it calls to you. That's my relationship with plant medicine. When I say plant medicine, I mean psilocybin, ayahuasca. I've never tried ayahuasca, or Mother Mary Jane. All right, a little marijuana. None of that during that time. This was all from my meditation, right? My go-to meditation is observing thought. Observing thought is just noticing the rising and falling of thought. Just noticing, not getting engaged. Even if you do get engaged, you just shift back. With enough space, you just shift back. And I found that in that experience when I had that shift in consciousness while watching tennis in my mom's room, that meditation felt just like that. It was just deep. It was, like I said, it was unexpected. It wasn't anything that I'd called toward, but I do feel deeply that it was due to my meditation practice. Had I not been committed and dedicated to my meditation practice, not exactly sure if I would have had that shift in consciousness. So much of it reminded me of the meditation. Now you might ask, since that moment, being there in that space, do you still get upset at things? Do you still feel resistance towards things or people? Or yes, indeed. I still feel the entire spectrum of human emotions, from happiness to sadness, to guilt, to shame, embarrassment, anger. I feel it. There are moments when I am resistant, and there are moments when I'm like, I don't resonate with someone else. It's not like this idea. What comes to mind is this picture perfect idea of what many might perceive enlightenment to be. Like, you're just floating about in the world. There's no problems. You're not being challenged by anything. when I say these things, right, it's coming from language. Challenge is a perspective of resistance. When I mention this idea of enlightenment, right, there is no challenge because there's no resistance. But often we still have to engage with people around us. It's all about community. And there might be people who are not in this state of consciousness where there's the smallest recognition of unity consciousness. So it's important to learn how to engage with that and how to engage with our own emotions that come up. So when I mention the word enlightenment, I don't want to feed into this idea of permanence, because I find that the idea of enlightenment is so distant, because it's this idea that that shift in consciousness that I had, that it's so permanent, that you're above and beyond everyone or everything else, right? You're so above the 3D world. When I share, by the way, that there was no plant medicine, I don't share it either to be like, I didn't need plant medicine to have this shift in consciousness. I'm sharing it to share how, for example, for me, my experience with plant medicine was always, it showed me something. Plant medicine is something that you take in, and you take in its consciousness, and it teaches you something. It's a teacher. Often my experience with it have always been so spiritual that afterwards, I don't take it for a very long time after. Very long time, because it taught me so much that I need time and I need space to process it. And what I've always taken away from it is that this is a shift in consciousness that can happen alone, without it. It's a teacher. You don't always need a teacher. The teacher guides you. It points you into a certain direction, and you walk the path. Just as this message here in this podcast episode is a pointer. The message and the story I share is a pointer. What I took away from that experience, the impact that I had, was that enlightenment is here right now. And I've listened to so many spiritual teachings and books, and I've always felt that. It's very interesting, right? When you're on a spiritual awakening, you always have this subtle awareness, a subtle pull sometimes, and like when you resonate with something, right? If you're listening to this, you might find that you're drawn toward it. So whenever I was in a space where those teachings were around me and I was receiving them, I felt drawn toward that. I was like, just hearing that allowed me to just rest. Even if I didn't fully understand it, because this experience is beyond the mind, beyond ego consciousness. But it's that small amount of space that it reaches your essence. In that glimpse of enlightenment, there was an awareness of our truest essence, pure awareness, unity consciousness. I recognized that within the smallest ounce of space, even a pause, the gaps of space between thoughts and words, that's enough. You don't necessarily need to meditate for hours on end. Often a pause is enough. A pause is enough to untether from who you think you are, who you think you're supposed to be, expectations and pressures. A pause is enough. You pause, you take a breath, reset. That space is enough to distance from the noise, from the judgments, from the criticisms, so you can return to a state of being here fully, being one with the moment. Enlightenment, I find, is a journey. It's not this fixed, permanent state. And when I say this, I say as a journey, as in you have a shift, but there's still so much to learn about the world of form. There's still so much to learn about the ego consciousness and socializing with others and learning how to handle the way you might respond to others, to how others may respond to you. Oftentimes, you'll notice that on your own awakening, you might find yourself more authentic. And here's something I'd like to clarify, right? We have the ego consciousness and we have unity consciousness. The ego is not the enemy. And I have recorded a podcast talking about that. So make sure you give it a listen. I'll put the link here. Give it a listen. The ego is not the enemy. The more that idea is validated, it just creates more ego. In fact, it creates a spiritual ego, this identity of what enlightenment is supposed to be and look like. Authenticity, it comes from embracing and honoring who you are in this world of form. We are two different individuals, right? Though we might resonate on certain aspects of the spiritual awakening, we have different hobbies, different things that we like, different foods we like. There is a uniqueness there. There is a specialness there, not in the form of being superior, but it's there. You don't have to be beyond this idea, of being beyond the 3D realm, being beyond an emotion that comes out. That idea, that's so 3D. I've heard that before, right? I heard someone say, "Oh my gosh, that's so 3D." That is a spiritual ego. It creates more of a hardened barrier rather than a softened barrier. That's how I see it. In many spiritual teachings, you will hear how the ego is a barrier to enlightenment. And it is, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Ego is an aspect of living in this world, an aspect of having a perspective and manifesting and building and creating and growing. Whatever it is that you uniquely find how you would like to engage in the world, that is an aspect of it. What it requires is observation, noticing, right? Noticing thoughts, observing the mind and the patterns of the mind, so that those triggers don't control you. They're not so automatic. Rather, you can notice a trigger within and not automatically react, but be still there with it to be able to observe it and make the necessary changes you need in the moment. So when I say authenticity, I'm referring to being who you are as an individual. And sometimes that takes some time, because sometimes we don't know who we are. Just life. We're learning. When I speak about our true self or our true essence, I'm speaking about that aspect of self that is the capital S. unchanging. It doesn't change. When I had that profound shift in consciousness, it was unchanging. There was a deep knowing that it's always here. It's always here now, and I can always recognize it. It doesn't change. It's beyond understanding. When you meditate, even with the smallest amount of space, you're shifting into your truest essence. Observing thought, you're shifting into that true essence where whatever attachments you may have had in this world, the desires, things that desire isn't wrong, but often it's not bad, right? But often with desire, when it's too much, begins to control you, causes a lot of just discontent, a lot of resistance. Not the best. So through meditation, through observing thought especially, it softens that barrier. And it makes it much easier to have those shifts in consciousness. Since that profound experience, I now have, though that was a glimpse, I have small glimpses where even after there's a moment of so much resistance, right? Listen, I have breakdowns too. All it takes is a small amount of space to be there, to open my eyes, to recognize oneness with everything. Even if it lasts this long, it's enough. Now, since then, I haven't had anything as intense as that, but I recognize that it doesn't really matter. It's not necessary. And it's not something I want to chase because that causes more resistance towards this moment, because this moment is it. The more, the better we can dive into right now. No matter our life experience, no matter what's happening, no matter what's not happening, no matter how long we meditated or been on our spiritual journey, being here now is enough, because this moment is enough. This moment is all you need. All you need is that small gap of space, right? And there's so much that came out of that moment. It's a very direct experience with consciousness, with life, with God, one may say. The recognition that it's always here right now, right? I forgot what I was going to say. I'll say this though. Everyone's journey is unique, so don't compare your journey to my own. Honor where you are right now. Don't try. Having this shift in consciousness wasn't at all about forcing anything or trying to be something. That's an aspect of ego consciousness. The shift in consciousness is a recognition that you already are. Enlightenment is already you. It's already here. There's no need to chase. Honor where you are right now. Honor your emotions. Don't ignore an emotion because the egoic mind says, oh, you're not supposed to feel that way. Oh, you're not a spiritual person if you react in such a way, right? That causes more judgment. It just layers on the barrier. It layers on more limitation. It's okay. Pause peacefully. Welcome in a brief moment of calm, alert awareness. Tune into the center of that emotion. No resistance. Pause and observe. Welcome in space. It's enough. It's enough. Allow yourself to express, because within that there's a flow. There's no resistance. I find that in that moment, I was completely content. Many have these shifts in consciousness through moments where they're in deep pain or suffering. It can happen too. That can trigger a shift. I learned that deep contentment and relaxation without the need for anything, that welcomes that too. So honor where you are right now. And if you find that you'd like to deepen your meditation experience and you'd like to learn more about observing thought, I encourage you to enroll in my course, Beyond the Chatter, how to break free from negative thoughts and deepen into inner stillness. Within this course, I show you how the practice of observing thought can help you untether and distance from thoughts. So they're not controlling you. You know how to harness and use thought instead of thoughts using you. I also wrote a book for this course. And I speak to entrepreneurs, creatives, athletes, influencers, and coaches, speaking about the fears we might experience, those negative thoughts in the mind that we might experience, and just how observing thought can put us on the path to following our mission. Listen, being on YouTube has been a journey for me, learning how to show up and feel comfortable and be my authentic self. It's been a journey worthwhile. It was worth it. And so this book, it dives into no self, observing thought, dives into contentment, while simultaneously following your purpose, your path. So I encourage you to enroll in Beyond the Chatter and stay committed to your meditation practice, stay committed to your spiritual journey, stay committed to yourself. It's worth it. Life is here. Life is now. Don't miss out, y'all. Life is right now. My name is Morcie. Thank you for joining me in this podcast episode, seeing more with me. Remember to breathe on purpose, lead with your heart, and give thanks to a fresh perspective.